Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Today is a special episode. This is a pre-recorded episode, so just FYI. We'll probably be in the chat, roaming around there, but this is a pre-recorded episode, and we're just going to kind of wing it. Some people have got some personal things happening, and therefore, we had to do one a little bit early here. So good morning. How's everyone doing?
Good morning and a happy Future Tuesday.
Future Tuesday.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I was really curious if you're going to remember. But kudos to you. I guess it's your day.
You were gonna dig on me later on in the show.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know what you forgot.
Anyway,
I would have said it on the next episode.
Oh,
So
you
then
gotta
there
let
would've
it
been
go.
No redemption. No redemption.
Couldn't have fixed it.
We all root for each other here.
Appreciate
so
that. Appreciate
we
that,
all-
Tom. Glad you got my back here.
And
We all root for each other.
being that this is an episode for the future here, I don't have a whole lot of extra things here, but I do have a couple announcements. There are some in-person events coming up here, and we've got some promotion codes for you, so you can go ahead and enjoy these events at a discount. Upcoming in September, there is a September 12th and 14th is the Data Insight Summit. You could visit datainsightsummit.us as the website. You can use the promotion code promo22 at checkout and get $100 off your tickets for registrations. And then if you're going, and that's in Chicago, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that's in Chicago. And then there is the Microsoft Power Platform Conference in Orlando, Florida, happening on September 20th through the 22nd. And you can use the promo code Milwaukee Power Platform Conference, MPPC Milwaukee UG, MILKW, whatever. I'll put it in the description. Too much words. It's all abbreviated and stuff. I wish they'd given me like a little bit like simpler.
Someone was writing
promo
this
code
down, going, "No, what did you say?"
Yeah. More. It's a lot of abbreviation things. I'll put it in the chat window and or the description of the video as well. Anyways, hope to see you there. We'll be definitely at the Chicago event. I don't know if any of us are making it down to the Power Platform Conference down in Orlando. So definitely, we'd love to see you September 12th through the 14th, if at all possible. Anyways, with that, let's jump in. Today, I think we're taking a topic from the mailbag. We've had some submissions that have been really good, top-notch quality. So thank you all for submitting some questions to us. This is today's topic. What happens if you have a strong spoke and no hub? Tommy, give us some background here. What does hub and spokes mean? Let's talk about that stuff first, I guess.
So I don't remember where that analogy came from. I don't think it's actually a documentation, but it's really the idea of you're having a BI team or centralized BI team, and you always think of that as really the hub. And obviously, for those who have bike theory or wheel theory in the room, which
Tommy does. Tommy bikes.
Yeah, but I don't have the theory. Anyways, you've seen how a bike works. There's a hub, then there's multiple spokes that are attached to it. The idea here is when you have a centralized BI team, it's kind of the centralized area, the center of excellence, your center where all the data in a sense flows out of. In this situation, and do you want to read it or I'll read it, Mike?
Yeah, you can go ahead and read it. Go ahead. Yeah. This is the question. So before we go too far about the question, let's just, to define the concept of the hub and spoke. So hub is like your center of excellence, potentially. There's a centralized, potentially paid for by the IT team, where there's a kind of a governance area and spans multiple organizations, but there's a centralizing of people and resources to aid the rest of the organization, which is the spokes, the outer ranges of that, to support them. It's kind of like the dotted line, right? There are people that are participating in the center of excellence, but they're not technically directly paid by it. This is one of these where I feel like it's a follow the money trail, right? There are a couple people at the corporate level, at the BI level, it says, hey, you guys are going to be BI and you're paid by IT. Therefore, you are the center of excellence. And then on the spoke end, those are the individuals in the business units. You're in the sales team, the marketing team, supply chain team, right? And they're very closely related to what the business is doing with data and their BI, but they're kind of dotted line related to the hub, the center of excellence. Is that a good explanation, Tommy? Is there anything else I missed there?
I mean, even with the spokes too, it could be like a BI department, not just an individual. It could be their own team of BI on a different department, but everything still flows from the centralized BI who dictates the process, the report layouts, etc. So
yeah, they have. Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. There are specific not challenges. Maybe not challenges. It would be there are specific tasks that I think the center of excellence takes on, right? Defining what governance looks like. What is our data policy? How do we share things? What is appropriate for sharing and what is not appropriate for sharing? What some of those general processes that help the business units, the spokes, just operate, because you're assuming here the spoke doesn't know as much as the hub.
Right. And and to fully do the wheel analogy, the hub is the only connection point for every spoke.
Correct. You kind of go through there. Yep.
So
Seth, anything you want to add there?
Yeah.
I'm good, man.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Move on.
So let's run through this question. So
this question is a good point here. So this sounds like a kind of a startup, not a startup, but they're starting to think about this hub and spoke approach. All right, Tommy, kick it off.
So I've been asked to stand up the first spoke with the full support of the central BI team. My background is in accounting and finance, but I know my way around data more than the typical business user. Unfortunately, while very advanced in Excel, I'm comparatively a PBI novice, and any advice on successfully standing up a strong spoke without much internal organization support. And it's talking about hiring decisions, but really this idea where the company wants him to stand up on the finance side, BI, but not having that support. And we've talked about adoption, over and over, how important it is. And we've talked about collaboration, executive sponsorship. So we love this idea because it really goes into, okay, the company is rooting for you or supporting you or, looking to you to build this up, but only for a single department.
Yes.
Without being able to, in a sense, cross-platform this and make this part of the organization. And I think a part of our question is, how do you do that? Is it really truly possible? And, what do you need to look out for?
And this kind of brings us to the main title of the episode here. What happens if you have a strong spoke but no hub, right? Basically. So this is the concept here is that we're centralizing this potentially in one business unit and starting there and figuring out what works there and how to replicate that across the organization. Or, it's hard to have a bicycle wheel with one spoke on it. I mean, it just doesn't work. It would not even run. So the concept here is there even a need for the hub? What's the purpose of the hub serving? Is the spoke actually the hub, but just in a business unit for now until it moves somewhere? I don't know. I'm curious your guys' thoughts. So, thoughts on this question? I'll kick it over to Seth. I'm sure he's got thoughts. Making funny faces, so that means there's thoughts coming.
I mean, based on the question, right? I'm trying to figure out where we spend a ton of our time, right? Because I see conflicting things. There is a BI team, right? Somebody sees that he's doing good work in a spoke or in an area and they want to create a spoke so like that aligns with the business unit, but there is a centralized BI team. So how can we, if we're defining this as the conversation of, oh, you're only the spoke and there is no central organization or BI, because he leads with the organization is starting to push Power BI, which is how he came about.
But that would assume that there was something else there. Like this, to me, this seems like there is a central BI team, and there is a BI team that's managing the data warehouse. And traditionally, they were like, okay, here, random people, you can have Tableau or you can have ClickView or whatever. There's some other visualization program that they have, and they're kind of like, okay, now we're transitioning away from that, but the central team still is supporting the legacy stuff. But they see this spoke kind of supporting a new tool that they're looking to move towards. So it's kind of like this, it's growing from, maybe the business up approach, right? We found a use case, it's in the business. Hey, we found a guy who knows how to do it. Let's start with him and start figuring that stuff out.
I think the distinction that I want to make here, though, is let's not have a conversation where this Power BI is starting and originating and coming just out of the spoke, and from this spoke it proliferates throughout the organization. Because I think there's some nuance there.
I agree.
Where some of the recommendations we may or may not make, depending on what we go through today, have to align with another team that is very keyed in and probably has the keys to the castle.
That's where I was thinking about that as well. I was thinking, because the way this question is framed, it sounds like there's already a team in place that is supposedly being the center of excellence, but it's just not technically inclusive of Power BI today at this point.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a fun conversation because it kind of flips our our episode 111, I think, when we're saying dealing with the spoke when we're the hub.
Yes.
Right. So this direction and reversing it where this gentleman's in an area that could be a real solid spoke.
Yes.
Right. And how do you build that, to interact with a larger group or potentially, be an example for other parts of the organization to build on the framework that you're setting up.
And I also think this is very interesting that we had just talked about the finance team and being incredibly strong around the data, the Excel gurus, the guys who are very comfortable in a tool that's already there. And this is a great candidate for whatever this is doing. If you're in finance at all, it sounds like this gentleman is coming from there. Sounds like this is a great candidate to have a good certified data set. This sounds like an opportunity to roll that out and to leverage that tool and move away a little bit from Power BI and automate more things inside. Move away from Excel, I'm sorry, and automate a bit more things inside Power BI.
But it's also very unique too from Tuesday, where Tuesday it was Power BI kind of being flooded out to the organization. This is where it sounds like Power BI is only going to be starting in finance, where the centralized BI team either is not using Power BI as we talked about, or not necessarily in a universal way. So this is also very unique too. So to me, I take like two approaches with this, where I'm either like, this is either doomed to fail, or there's going to be a lot of fires, or it's going to be barging through the China shop, so to speak.
So I think I like where you're going with this one, Tommy, because I think I'm not sure I'm sure I would write it off quite yet. Is that it is doomed to fail. However, I do think when you look at the adoption roadmap and how Microsoft is documenting out, ways things are adopted, this is a very much business level approach first, right? What happens in your department with leading this Power BI initiative is really going to potentially drive a lot of the rest of the organization. And quite frankly, there's going to be a good amount of political movement, I guess, maybe inside the company around this department and how good this tool is and where is it and why is it adding value. And again, my impression right now is that I've done a couple of these when Power BI first came out, and I was starting to use like Power Query and Excel, and then got very heavily into Power BI and thought this is the thing to do. I started this. This was like my story to some degree. I was in a single department. We were in the marketing team. We had a lot of data coming from our customers, and I was the one kind of starting off making these Power BI reports. And there wasn't really anyone else in the organization supporting it, using it. We basically just had permission to leverage the tool. So I feel like when I experienced this, there was potentially a lot of pushback and a lot of training, a lot of showing people there was a better way to move their data around. Because I guarantee you, I mean, particularly in this department, there's already probably a ton of people already using Excel. You just got to show them, hey, there's a better way of doing some of this, and here it is inside this Power BI bubble.
Well, your situation is probably a little similar to mine back in the day, where maybe there was a BI tool already out there, but it was kind of a blank slate.
Yeah.
Right. So it was very easy to push, like, hey, look at this new tool, because I had a very similar situation. We didn't have anything, but it was very easy to bring in that adoption. I think in this case, if I'm this person and I'm put in this situation, the first thing I'm asking for is defined expectations, and also that support.
What does success look like?
Well, yeah, and what success are you going to provide for me as well? Like, hey, if you're going to task me to be the director of BI for finance or what's not, and to use Power BI, the fact in my head, I don't want to call it a red flag, but the most attentive thing on my mind is that there's already a central BI team at the company. What are they doing? What tool are they using? I don't want to invest my time or my team to start adopting Power BI if I know that at any point their centralized BI can just come in and swoop that.
I don't know though. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't think that's this use case.
I don't think
the organization is pushing Power BI.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that decision's been made.
That's why he learned Power BI.
So I think one of the things
I don't know.
Actually, true. We didn't say. We were assuming. That's a bad thing.
They just said we rock. So that's this person, this amazing person.
This amazing person. So I would also say here, I mean, probably right at the beginning, I would also echo here, executive sponsor, someone who is carrying this torch and promoting the successes and the wins of this is essential. And this is definitely in the roadmap. Even if you're a spoke, I think there's someone in your department that understands the value of what you're going to be producing. And I think it's very important that you get someone on board immediately and have those conversations regularly, meet with them, talk to them about your challenges, right? So challenges I see coming up, right? Some of those challenges are getting access to the data, whatever that data may be. Is now, granted, if you're a leader in the finance department, you probably already have all access to the data. But if you're going to be dumping a bunch of things out to Excel and then having to absorb those, yes, you can do that. That is definitely a good starting point, but I don't think you want to push for that. I think that would be a topic I would want to bring up to my executive sponsor and say, hey, look, I can get this data out. Here's my data sources. Of the ones I can touch, these are the ones I have to go manually grab Excel files from. Is there anything you can help me push for to give me better connections into these systems so I can better automate the load of those things? Because the whole game here is automate to win. If you do anything more than once or twice, or if you do anything 3 times, you better think about automating it, because it's worth your time to automate it at that point in time.
I agree with that. I'm going to assume that that's at least halfway in the bag if the organization is going to promote and find budget for 2 people, right? Or allow additional resources to be added to that area that are have expertise in Power BI.
What do you say? There's only 2 people on the BIT on his team right now.
Nobody. It's just him.
I think it's the individual,
and then with a potential to potentially hire in more people later on.
Correct.
So,
yeah. And I think your first 2 hires are going to be very critical. Like your first hire will be very critical.
So
your second hire, you can be a little bit more.
Let's hone in on this a little bit, because I think we didn't gloss over, we outlined it, but this, before you get to hire, that's why it's so important that whoever's requesting that the spoke be built clearly defines what the organization defines as success. Like, what is the purpose of this team? Is it to do what you've done related to taking a whole bunch of business logic and slow processes in Excel and accelerate them and have an automated report, and you're going to do that in the accounting or finance area with this group of people, then, and that's the focus alone, like just to streamline and produce data is quicker than you did before, which ton of value in that, right? Especially in those areas where the dollars and cents decisions are made on those a lot, right? Because that would in my mind start to push, like, who I'm going to hire, because they have to have a background that is in finance or accounting, or like to understand what we're doing.
Yes.
Because that's going to be the primary role, versus somebody who's straight Power BI. Or do I do one straight Power BI that knows the ecosystem, and then one mix, like this individual who's kind of learned along the way? And I think that's important to have clarity with whoever's requesting the spoke, because that is going to define, what are the roles and responsibilities for this spoke. Because the way I think about it is, these are the business experts, right? Like, they are the ones that have learned Power BI. That is a skill set that they've grown in, but they aren't BI, like full BI team people, right? They're subject matter experts in an area. I mean, you could have areas that have subject matter experts as well, depending on how large they are. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, if this is just starting up, that's where I would really lean into understanding, like, is this new group supposed to just be building reporting in this area and working with, the other subject matter experts, to almost be like a satellite in here BI group, right? Where you still are the domain experts of the spoke, etc., but you're going to be working with a hub, that kind of thing. Or is it just to do a bunch of this replacement and building of heavy business side logic that you need to understand, and what you're doing to go build the reports?
This is why it's so important too that we're dealing with the spoke, right? We're not dealing with the hub. where to me, it goes back to the expectations. Like, how much support do we have from the hub? Like, how much support will they be providing us? Are they going to be providing us any of the data, or at least anything cleaned up? Are we going to have resources on templates or on certain DAX measures? If we don't have that support, that expectation needs to be clear with whoever the person's working with. Where
I think you're asking a lot of questions that we already know the answer to. All those things are no. Like,
yeah. So if they're no,
the hub does not. It's a weak hub.
Okay.
So assume none of that, right? And so what I would say is, to your point, I would flip your questions around and say, I wouldn't ask the questions. I would say, define these things, right? I would have regular. So I would reverse your comments and say, this is the responsibility of whoever is leading the Power BI initiative, whether it is the hub or the spoke. Right. It's important for you to understand or evaluate, do we want to use templates? Do we have certified data sets? What do those look like? I think, Seth, you made a really interesting point just a second ago, which was like, is this team focusing on building reports just for that team? Or is the expectation that you're going to mature a data set in finance that will be shared to other parts of the organization or distributed more widely?
Right.
I think that's a good distinction. That's a good definition of like, what are the expectations? And then I'd also echo here is one of these things is there's probably already standards existing inside the BI team, the team that's not using Power BI today currently. Talk to them about that. Make sure you understand what those standards are and try to figure out ways of incorporating those standards and or working with them to adjust them so that they can adapt to Power BI. One of the things I think is important to note here is Power BI is a framework. It has specific walls around what you can build within and without. And certain things are very easy if you play very well inside that framework. Other things are much harder if you play outside of that framework. So, certain types of visuals, the way you want to display information, some of that is much harder if you don't play inside that generalized framework of Power BI. So I think as becoming the leader in the Power BI space, it's your job to take what the organization is doing, read into, like, understand it, and then overlay how does that informational platform relate or play well with Power BI as well. So you're kind of that intermediary person between the two.
I'm going to dial you back again just because how I read the
No, Seth, you will not dial me back. No dialing.
How I read the question is
stop.
one of the challenges here is they don't feel extremely comfortable in the Power BI ecosystem yet, right?
Okay, so, well, that was one of my advice.
Your description thing is scary as hell for somebody like that because like, what do you mean the organization's going to look at me? And that's where, whether it's a question that Tommy was framing or your declarative statement of you defining things, I think it's important to understand what the responsibilities and the roles that you have to play in this kind of new elevated role where you're going to build out a team or a spoke, right? Because if there is a team, right, that is going to be doing the larger organizational efforts, I would believe there is based on the size of the organization, right? What you have to set the guardrails around the handoffs.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't do that unless you know what the expectations of the organization are. And that's why I'm saying if it's just spoke, if it's just this area, like let's focus on what do you do to build a good framework that could potentially be reused in other areas, right? But isn't going to put them in a position where all of a sudden they have to assume responsibility for building out the entire data culture within an organization, because I think the question is framed much more in the spoke area where it's like, hey, we have what we would have classified as, the Power BI champion in the area because they took it upon themselves to learn Power BI, go into their Excel frame world, and change it. Which I think also doves to another conversation we had of like, how do you make an impact on your organization? This is a direct representation of what can happen when you take the initiative, because it's the nights and the weekends where they learn Power BI. They took their process and the organization was like, dang, do you want to be promoted and have people report to you? Right?
Yeah. Right. And I would say, I mean, if you're thinking, like, again, the way the question's phrased here, if there is nervousness around, I don't know what I don't know, educate yourself, right?
Just keep learning.
Start at episode 1 on the Explicit Measures podcast, and you have 125 hours to get through. So that's
You'll be fired by 87. So, but
And
Well,
but then
yeah,
but there's already like a ton of documentation, the Microsoft Center of Excellence, the Microsoft adoption roadmap, like all those things are very relevant, and we've resonated very much with what those documents are doing. I'd say those are very good places to start learning from.
see, I'm not worried nearly as much as the person, and this is why I'll go back to that doomed to fail. Not that they are, but I want to emphasize Seth's point where because we're dealing with Spoke, we don't know. Someone says, "Yeah, we just want you to do finance, or we just want you to do this one subset," but that can easily evolve very quickly. And to me, this is a conversation. This project kicks off with whoever told him or this person that they're going to be doing this with, where do you see this in 6 months or a year, that as serving as a Spoke? Like, what do you foresee for this team? And they're like, oh, and if they say all this complexities, you're going to be delivering reports, like, then we're not a Spoke, and trying to understand what the role this is going to be playing. To me, without what role the Spoke's going to be playing, because I think it's part of that definition too, right? Where they're like, I want you to be the director of BI, but I want you to do it just for finance.
That's not what I read. A director, not the director of BI.
A director. Okay, so not the director.
I think you're getting hung up on this director thing. I don't think it matters.
Well,
it's
not
irrelevant.
Even that, he's tasked, or this person is tasked to lead BI for finance.
No, and I'm not reading it that way. It's just that they're tasked to lead Power BI, period. Not for finance. He just happens to be from the finance space.
They've done something in the organization that the organization has said, that's valuable.
Yeah.
We'll promote you and give you
keep doing what you're doing. Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. Keep growing this thing.
So I want to move on, right? But sure. I do agree from the standpoint that what do you do with, these clearly defined roles and responsibilities, right? Like you have to, depending on where they're at, you have to set up like just a visual framework of how you see this is going to work and pitch that before you do anything else.
Yeah.
Like you need to get clarity of, I'm going to go build this thing and this is what we're going to do. And here's our kind of how we interact with the organization, what our roles and responsibilities are, and get sign off on that. Because then you're not going to get the balloon of role, like you are set up to fail. You don't have enough of the resources that you need because the organization's, expectations are way off the rails, or it aligns directly to, what they're asking you to do. And now you have a framework that you can, as you're bringing folks in, here's where we fit. Here's how we interact with folks.
Yes.
Here's a lot of TBDs because we don't have a centralized, or we do have a centralized, right? At least you're defining what you're going to take responsibility for and carving off the rest of those are things that need to get figured out, but aren't going to be a primary responsibility unless things want to get shifted in the future.
And I definitely, I think you're with that. You're saying, I like what you're saying, Seth, there, but it's a lot of this, all the things that Microsoft provides you, how to migrate to Power BI, adoption roadmap, implementation planning. There's a lot of, Microsoft's Center of Excellence. These are good reference points for all this information. I'd highly recommend read through that and become very familiar with these modals of things. And then I'd also recommend, there's great training out there. Like go to Melissa Coates' Power BI deployment and governance class. It's definitely like if they're going to invest in you and expect you to produce something of value to the organization in this scale, say you need to go to this thing. It's definitely worth your time and your effort to go in and get that training. So that way you're speaking from more of a point of you're leaning on other people's expertise and you're bringing that to the table when you're having these conversations.
Well, Mike, let me ask you, how much then do you copy and paste and just kind of consider yourself a smaller ecosystem in the company? Like as being a Spoke and not in a sense part of a hub or part of a weak hub, you just say we're going to act like a centralized Power BI team within the department.
That's where I'm going. Yeah,
that's where
I'm going with this. I think it's one of these ideas of like, we talked a little recently around local versus global models, right? I think what I'm feeling to me is how I would run it if this were in my position. I would run my Spoke as if it was just if it's my own company. It's my own little tiny, like we have 15 users. We have a smaller group. I'm going to build a SharePoint page. I'm going to build a knowledge base. I'm going to show people how to connect to things. I'm going to run lunch and learns on my data sets and reports that I do on Fridays to try and throw in a power hour there for people to start educating them, right? One of the big hurdles I think they're going to face here is there's a lot of education across the company that needs to be done. Just because I send you a Power BI report doesn't mean you know how to use it or all the buttons and the features of Power BI. So I feel like for this person, one of your major goals or one of your major exercises will be here is to educate everyone else on here's Power BI, here's where it fits, and here's how to use it. And I'd run it just like a center of excellence. And then when it gets bigger, right, then you can migrate that work into something that is part of the central team.
I'm not going to agree with it. Like, it could be that they're in the position where that is what they're being asked to do, at which point they have a lot of learning to do, right? I agree with you from the standpoint that using the adoption roadmap in the context of your specific area, there's value there, because you can look through here and you can like, okay, well, what is content ownership and management in my area? How do I deliver reports in my area? What is like, how do we govern our reporting? What is the system oversight that we have? How do we mentor and user enable in my area, right? Like, all of this can be in the scope of just your area. And if you align that to the spoke, where your goal is to make sure that people understand the reports, you're building them efficiently and effectively, then that can be reused by other people. I don't read this as like the organization is telling them that they're responsible for going out into the organization and being the Power BI champion for everybody, because I think that would scare the crap out of them right now. If it doesn't, cool, then follow Mike's advice, right? But at the same time, I think we're saying the same things. I'm shifting context to say, I think you only need to care about your spoke. But all of the things that you would find in the adoption roadmap from an organizational level that are really difficult because you're branching through many different spokes are still relevant to just your area. And if you set them up this way, I think you're setting yourself up for success to be able to interact with larger teams, whether that's a centralized hub or other groups that are going to be built around this, or if you're just going to be the de facto person that runs everything, right? Like, it all works in that realm.
Well, and I think part of it, so I actually I initially was leaning towards Mike, where the same thought of just copy and paste in a mic, you're in a different ecosystem.
Yep.
But there's a few things too with the mailbag that made me think a little more too, where he's like, it's only been around for 3 months. So a big part of this still is selling it. Like, even though someone's championing him, it's not necessarily the entire company. It's only been around for 3 months. It's just taking one report and people love it, but that doesn't mean it works for every concept. And the other part too is the idea of the ecosystem, this micro system, only works if they are completely separated from that hub, whatever that hub is. Like, if it is just a giant Excel team or they're using something else. Again, Power BI has just been introduced to this organization in the very early stages. So it's very hard to say, okay, you want Power BI? Great. We're going to go in, we're going to do this, center of excellence. We're going to have this whole content delivery where you're still trying to sell it. And there may be this hub that is still, owner of some of the data too, where you can't just sever that tie. And I don't think that works. There's part of this is selling it, because the other thing is the competing data. I think there's still going to be Excel files around for a while. This is not something that's going to happen.
I mean, I think you're selling it as very far down the road. I mean, I mean, the way I read this one, they've already bought in. They're doing it. It's happening.
Yeah.
So like selling it, like the idea has been sold. It's now a matter of like governing it, understanding it. Like, so to me, things that are like important. So I'm trying to give advice to someone like who's asking me like, what do I do? Here's what you do. Go read these documentations. Like, I don't care if you're scared of it or not. You need to be educated in these areas to be able to be effective and to do like this higher level stuff. Like, you need to get familiar with all the Power BI admin. If you don't have admin privileges on your Power BI tenant, you need to go get those. You need to become the Power BI admin and read through or look at or be comfortable with looking at all those features and understanding what's turned on, what's turned off inside the admin portal. I'd also say you also need to get familiar with understanding how to monitor things in Power BI, whether it's a usage report, whether it's tenant-wide monitoring. There's a whole bunch of free solutions. Rui Romano has a PBI monitor solution that's out there. Get comfortable with that. I know you're not technically always there. That's a very heavy, like, PowerShell and other things in the code. But I think as a director or if you're gonna come in and lead this stuff, you need to get familiar with these tools. Tommy, you've done a lot of speaking around how to monitor things as well. getting a process in place to evaluate and be able to measure success of I produce these things. This is how they're being used. That's important at that role and that level. And the last one I would say is you need to also come up with a system to how you're going to manage versions of reports. There's also a free tool out there as well. Power BI Tips offers Power BI version control. So you can go version control your Power BI files through SharePoint using a Power App. So these are the things that I'm like, if I'm recommending someone to get familiar with these are the areas I want you to get familiar with, because these are the areas that if you do well, you will be successful.
And I agree with that, right? And what is being pitched here is like, this is an individual contributor. They're being asked to step into a role where you need to like have all of these pieces in place and understand where they fit.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's what we're recommending is
Yeah.
you look at the adoption roadmap as a framework,
yes,
like the big areas. And then within that general framework, then you can start to have conversations around here's what the team is doing, here's why they're doing it, here's the pieces, right? So
exactly right.
You listed out some, like I think a couple others in there are like your process should be standardized for your team of people to go build reports. A great way to do that is templates. Building and having standardized ways in which a report is built, right? Visuals are they all look the same. So you don't have people just defining and building their own stuff all the time. You can use backgrounds, layouts, template, like all of the pieces also that we've done on Power BI Tips, or build your own, right? Where you have the same standard look and feel for the certain types of reports.
Correct.
And everybody just knows how to go build a report, where all the pieces are for those, and you're simplifying a lot of the things that
waste time
can just be one-off things, right?
Totally.
I think the biggest shift in moving from individual contributor to this role and building the spoke is just spend some time like getting an idea of all of these pieces that you can streamline,
document
and then
it.
that will set your roadmap for like what are the things you're going to start to implement and need to build for this spoke to work in not a shotgun manner, right? Like there should be a methodical way in which you roll this out. And then you'll also like that should define what you need from the skills of the folks that you're bringing on, right? Because ultimately what a spoke needs to do, just like a hub, is develop standards for yourself, and so that the organization and the product that you're producing is understandable. So part of that is documentation, part of it is understanding metrics and conveying that to individuals. So I think that's all I'm saying is like, I think we're all saying the same things potentially in different ways depending on the scenario, but ultimately that is like the new element that you're going to be engaged in here. And what's paramount to do up front is make sure you know all these pieces, maybe not the details, right? Because that's why you'd be hiring folks,
Right.
but at least understand where they are, what to do, how and why you're doing something. And a ton of that is all in that documentation that we've been going through, especially
Well,
even with implementation, right?
Well, and to Mike's point, or to both of your points, we're very similar to what we're saying, but I would want to take a step back with what this person or this team is going to need to establish. Like, I think like the PBI monitor, all that stuff's well and important, but to me, the focus in the very beginning to the standardization side is building the trust. Like I'll still say, like, yes, the organization is, there are some people who are buying into this person, into this company, but the whole finance team doesn't necessarily know Power BI is out there. So to me, is establishing trust and consistency right off the bat. Where
how do
to
you
your
do
point,
that?
like,
You say that, but how do you do it?
yeah, no, I think there's the basic tenets, right? Where a consistent experience for a user. So we
That's
talked
still
about
not a how. How do you do it though? That's what I'm getting to. Like, how do you?
template. Okay, yeah. So data quality, templates, consistent user experience in Power BI. How are we deploying the app, our reports? Is it being shared or is it through an app? So the user can have the same experience in the report. The layouts. If I have three people building reports, one person's not putting the title in the bottom right, the other person's putting a visual, in the top left, having a consistent layout. The data quality is going to be the number one. As you develop more reports, because it's not just this one report that they're converting an Excel file. As you convert to different systems, the data quality is going to be paramount, that you have a system for whoever's developing it, because either you hire a professional Power BI developer who needs to learn the finance team, or you hire someone in finance who needs to learn Power BI, or there's the rare instance where you have someone in both. That's usually not the case. Regardless of that situation, you're going to need that Q&A. That's going to be the most paramount part of this, especially where, again, I'm going to take the assumption, because they are not the hub, there are other systems of gathering and collecting data at the company where other users can see the same numbers or see very similar numbers, whether it's in Excel or whether it's Power BI. So you're still going through this adoption curve. And again, since it's not a universal rollout, it's just for this team, there's competition. Again, maybe I'm making too many assumptions there, but
No.
I would
I,
I would put easy money on that there's other systems of consuming data at the organization for the same team.
I,
So you have to
I'm trying to generalize a bit more here. Like, you're going very specific on very specific things. Yes, there's Q&A, there's all these other things, but like, I'm trying to say,
that's what I was trying to say. Trust and experience. That's my general.
But to me, that's too general, is what I'm looking for. Like, I think there's like this concept of like, so here, let me add some flavor to what I'm thinking here on this one. There is this constant idea of I'm setting something up, and then I'm communicating what I set up over and over again. And anything you're talking about here, whether it's a single data set, a single report. And so, Seth, you're talking earlier about we need to build a process or standards around how we build reports. I think that's very important. But just making the process is not good enough. It's making the process, defining things that I would want to define as, okay, how do we get requirements for report? How do I prioritize which report we're working on? How do we vet the data and make sure that it's correct? And I started like listing out a little thing here. There's a pattern how this stuff should work for every report. Requirements, model, report build, quality, and revisions. To me, that's like, doesn't matter what you're doing. You need to build process around what those things are looking like and coming back and saying, okay, here is the process. And you can't just stop there. You have to take whatever you're defining, data quality, how we define data quality, what it is, what it looks like, all those things. You have to document it and push it back out there. And this is where I think, like, just doing the process, like in all these situations, like for adoption roadmap, what we're doing, our vision, all those kind of things. I think all this stuff will be more successful when you have a clearly a single point or a single location where you can start throwing all this information back at people. And when you introduce someone to a new thing, you're like, hey, look, here is my process. You asked me here's how we groom report requests. Here's how we do these things. Here's how we're ticketing this stuff. Here's how we're tracking how much time it's taking to build these various things, because someone inevitably is going to be like, well, we're going to have problems with this data set. We're going to have questions about it. How are those things getting funneled back in to get revised or fixed or whatever? So I think, to me right now, I'm thinking like a lot of this is define what you want to do, because you can do it any different ways, but put it in a place where everyone can see it. So that way it's clearly communicated.
I think I heard two different areas from both of you. And what I mean
Possibly.
by that is, what I mean by that is, but they're key areas, right? I think, Mike, what I heard you talking about is managing the development and delivery.
Yes,
right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely part of this, right?
Yes.
Is there a system? Is it we use Jira, right? Like Teams, whatever the case,
whatever,
like
lists and SharePoint. I don't care. Do
how
something.
are you managing the business understanding what requests are in the pipeline, what requirements you have and need to build them, like, because there is going to be parts of that now. Like, you're going to have a demand, you're going to have a backlog of things that need to get done, and you need to prioritize them, and then you need to fit them into, how do you go build them? And that should be iterative. We have a podcast about that as well. What I think, Tommy, you're talking about, and I agree with Mike's, like, jumping into trust is a really ambiguous, like, okay, how do you do that? I think the way I think about that is, it's really important for the teams or your team that you're developing to understand that you have a single point of contact to the end user, right? And if you think about, like, that single point of contact is the only way you can ensure like the data quality, the layout, the reliability of refresh, the clarity of what's in that report and
like
where.
That. Yep.
All of those are the components underneath the scenes, right?
Of trust.
That have tons of spider webs, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of different variables, but you only have a single point of contact where all of that needs to be working as you would expect and producing the best experience for the end user. And if all of those things are in play and in line, you build trust with those consumers. But if any one of those is off, right, that's where
You're
you
eroding
start
trust.
to lose. Correct.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So trust is built by your solutions working through that single point of contact lens. And there's a lot of things underneath there that I think we're recommending you build into your framework and the things so that by the time you're delivering something, you have a quality product.
Well, and no, I think maybe I'll rephrase the word trust, but I think you said a better word. Maybe it's probably reliability. How reliable is it? Because you're starting from a not point zero where there's zero reliability or zero trust, but you're starting from a low point. Mike, you said something very actually very powerful too. That's I think the third spoke of this other hub spoke, whatever. How many
Spokes
hubs
and
we have at
hubs.
this point? Yeah,
Spokes and hubs and
yeah,
spokes
we
and
got a
hubs and
lot
spokes
of
and hubs.
hubs on this wheel, so which would not work. But I think
It's an 18-wheeler now. It's just
yeah,
all
right.
hubs, no spokes. That's gonna be our next one. What happens when you have all hubs, no spokes?
Too many chefs in the kitchen. That's gonna be over on episode 202. But honestly, the other part too is I think the reliability of the delivery and the communication, right? Because
I think
again,
that's key.
yeah, and
I think it's a big point of this, especially when you're starting from nothing. People don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And that's what I mean by clarity, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to have the repository, like the place where
Yeah.
you're referencing,
Yes.
When you have all those conversations. And it's like, hey, if you want to go here, it's either in the report or we've built this, place where you can go reference at any time what we're built, like the metric behind this or what this means or what we've agreed upon, right? And yes, there's a lot more communication. I think we called that empathy in our last one. Like what do teams need from you? What do you need from them?
Exactly.
Like, what are the handoffs? Like a lot of like put yourself in people's shoes. One thing I did want to dovetail into here a little bit is a caution, right? So I don't know your org, right? But if it's it certainly sounds like a promotion could happen. There's budget for 2 people.
Oh yeah,
right?
This is a good point.
Define those before everything else.
Yes, don't commit to say yes
if there's a level of like the dangle of, well, we will promote you, right? Then define what that means. Like when you hire the 2 folks, you will get the director position, and that means this, right? Don't let this ambiguous like, oh, we will do this thing in the far future.
Get it in writing. Get it in writing, because
like put it in writing. I'm going to put in a ton of work to build this spoke out for you. Like ideally, they make you that now, give you the budget, and then you go hire people, right?
I would
if
opt for
you're going
that
to
direction.
take on responsibility, then I would push for the promotion before you go do all the work.
Because as soon as you do all the work and then ask for the promotion,
exactly,
you've lost your upper hand at this point in time. And I'm super.
There's a quid pro quo, right? I'm always like, I understand both areas of the business very well, but at the same time, if you're providing so much value that there's a lot of interest in you growing this and building this within the organization, then leverage it. Like handshake, right? Yes, like I've already showed you that there's a lot of value in what I'm doing, right? Which is why they're saying, oh, we'll promote you. Then great, promote me. And then I will do all these other things.
Yes.
And maybe that is an agenda item, right? You take what we're saying in the podcast, like say, here's what I'm willing to do for you. Promote me, do this thing, and I'll go do this for you.
And maybe this was just me working with bad managers. I am not trusting of organizations and commitments like this that are made off the cuff. I am not.
Mike, would you start working for a client without them
paying me,
signing in paper that they're going to pay?
Oh, heck no.
No,
I won't start anything. I will have there are negotiating contracts and agreements, NDA.
Correct.
Like people won't even talk to me unless I have an NDA in place.
The value
It's
prop
huge.
is already there.
Yes.
And technically, from the description that I read, nights and weekends have been already absorbed to go rebuild this,
Yes.
right? To show the value in the area where the organization's like, yeah, I want that.
Mhm.
Great. That's exactly why we say, like, find an area of need in your business. Like Power BI has a way of like accelerating your career.
Yeah.
But when those opportunities arise after you've already done the work, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key. Capitalize. Like, don't take advantage, but at the same time, like, don't let people take advantage of you.
Right. And it's the same adage with the way you were with your kids, where like clean up your room and also the living room kind of thing, where they'll keep it's an unfortunate part of the world we live, or the business we live in, but there's no freebie. So I am very much on the same opinion as both of you, where even to the extent where it's like, you want to do this, okay, then I need the resources now, in terms of like the budget and the directorship, like, because they can or like really written down what it, let's define it, not in 3 months, like what would constitute me being the director, or what would constitute me being in this position.
But it also speaks volumes that you would come to that conversation with a plan.
Yeah,
right.
that's
Like,
true.
Here's what I'm seeing. Here's the direction I want to go. Here's where I need these two people to be in order to support these business goals.
Yep.
Here's what I'm going to execute on when you promote me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, because they would be changing the role of that individual as well, I'm sure, because you would have to devote your time towards those activities versus what they're doing in current state, right?
And that's yeah.
I like that a lot. I think that's a very good approach there. I like the, that is my biggest hesitation here of all this. It's kind of like, if you're going to do all this work, and I've been in a number of positions where they're like, yeah, we'll give you the promotion, but you need to be doing all the things of that position before we promote you to that position. And every organization that I've been in, or every team, it's very hard to get to that next level of something without clear, part of your goals. It's part of your plan. Hey, I've done XYZ training. I've done these things. And then I literally had to go through like, okay, give me the expectations for that role. List it out for me. What are the check boxes I need to be hitting? Because then I can document what those are and put it back down in, again, if this is a larger organization, I'm sure there's already some sort of performance management system in place that then becomes your tool of choice to, I was so maybe sneaky, strategic. I don't know what you want to call it. Sneaky / strategic. I was so strategic. I would not have any of my employee goals be an even number. If they said, hey, make some employee goals how we meet corporate objectives, I would not make it 2, 4, or 6 number of goals. It had to be an odd number, because they would rank you 1 through 5, or good to excellent, whatever those ranges were in those different goals. And if I had 4 goals, you could get a tie. 2 good, 2 excellent. Well, what does that mean? There's no like, was I really overall excellent, or was I just good?
Mike is diabolical with this.
I am diabolical, man. So I would make 5.
There's some
strategy. I had some situations where I had 3 excellents and 2 goods, because I just covering my bases, getting, okay, we got these things done, and I had 3 excellences, and I came back and said, I deserve a higher pay raise because I have more excellent than good. Therefore, I'm adding more value to the organization in this such and such way. And then the reasoning came back to me. Well, not all goals are created equal. You didn't communicate that earlier. Dude, I was livid. I was like, come on. Like, you're just literally trying not to do things like, and then I was like, at this point, I'm like, okay, you guys clearly don't know what you're doing. I'm gotta move on here. I'm out of here.
Or they clearly outplayed you and lost a resource.
They clearly outplayed me, and then I was like, see ya. I'm gonna go find more money somewhere else.
Well, but so Seth, I cut you off. You got me too excited. You remember what you were saying? Look, sorry, I know.
That is a useless question. It was Seth. When Seth says something, it comes out of the mouth, and that's it. It's done. It's gone.
You're either listening and paying attention,
or it ain't coming back.
Well, but it's not just about salary too. I mean, it's obviously the salary is a huge part of this, but I think also for the success of this person, it's also defining what authority they're going to have. Like, what decisions are they going to be able to make in this new role? To me,
To me,
that's the
that's
other.
roles
That's
and
a huge.
responsibilities.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
it's you.
as
You
a
obviously
director,
are right, but at the
yeah,
same time, like that isn't going to just get thrown out if people don't think that that individual has the the drive or qualities to fill that role, right? Yes, salary is part of that.
Know your
Ownership
market
of the
value.
area,
Go research
ownership
this.
of the area. Like, what are your new responsibilities going to be?
Yep.
Like, we're also assuming individual contributor as opposed to a manager or something
well,
like that. Maybe
I'm
they
just
already
saying, yeah.
manage people, and
But
there's some additional resources that are coming on top of it.
I'd
I would
also
say
echo
that if you're going
here
to be,
too. Like there is a wealth of free information out there. You want to know what a director role should be making and what they should be doing? Go out and look it up. There's a ton of jobs on Glassdoor.com or wherever. You should see what your market value is worth and what you should be doing, because those are like you can literally go to the internet and find what is an expectation of a BI director, because there is hundreds of resumes out there that are defining what companies want people to do in that role.
Director.
Director. Sorry.
Director.
What did I say? The director?
The BI director.
Oh, a director. But I mean, but there's directors of there's also directors of business intelligence too. Maybe slightly different requirements, but you could, again, the information is out there. Research it. Know it better than the people hiring you or trying to promote you.
But but this comes though with the territory of you're saying I will start being a director at this point. But like I said, I think they're not to use doomed to fail, but you're setting yourself up for less success if you don't know the sway that you now have in this new position. Like, what decisions can you make now independently that you could not make before? There needs to be things that you should be able to push.
Interesting. I didn't think of it that way.
Because if you're still doing if you're in a sense doing the same thing just with a different role, and you still have to go through these approval channels and like, well, I don't know if I can hire, I don't really have a budget, and people also don't see you with that authority to, in a sense, like, we're going to change systems because things are going to change, things are going to need to change.
Yep, agreed.
And if this person doesn't have that authority to do that, if they have to, you're kind of setting yourself up for complications, we'll say.
And I think that you say authority, and I kind of go.
Is not the word,
but I agree with you. Like, that to me is part of what is the new responsibilities of this position, and what am I going to be asked to do, and how does that interact with the other parts of the system?
Sure.
Right. Which is why I think some due diligence from this individual to like figure out the framework, like how is this supposed to work, and this is why they're asking the question, how do you build the spoke? There is that part of it where if they're being tasked to do something that flies in the face of what you're bringing up, which is, well, I don't have the authority to do that, right? Or so and so over here is going to put a stop to every aspect of that thing. You're just setting me up to fail here. That's why it's important to understand that, or define those and say, no, like, this is, you're also going to have, the ability to supersede Tommy, who's telling you no all the time.
Like, if they're telling this person,
which could allude to the corporate spot, like the sponsor, right? Like, executive sponsor, right? Like, maybe that's an avenue around it, right? Because there's obviously a business objective behind the moves here, right? So somebody thinks there's value somewhere. You just got to lean into who that is and make sure that role and everything about it is defined in such a way that it's beneficial.
Especially with finance, if there's, like, let's say they want to remove all the Excel files, so that's the idea of this person's role. Well, you better have some ability to stop Excel files and push people towards the new system.
Right. So, well, or what other teams are going to help you do to that, right?
Like, yes.
Is there an engineering core, if that's, because that might not be an area of expertise.
Right.
I mean, to that point, to your point there, I know we're basically at time here, but to finish that off, that thought there, last point there, Tommy, like, you're right. But I think that's part of, like, setting the standards for things, right? Okay, yes, you have a source of Excel, but we've already defined that the standards for sharing reports to multiple organizations or a certified data set requires no Excel source as a source system. So you have to figure out a different way. So setting up what those expectations are, I think, is part of this role, and saying, all right, we're going to lay down some of the rules of the road. Here's what we're defining. Here's what a certified data set means to our organization. Again, Yeah. Anyways, I think we should wrap here on final thoughts. I think for me, final thoughts. There's a lot of good stuff here. So, I think the biggest takeaway for me was educate. Right. So there is a lot of great resources out there. Spend some real time. If this is something that you're being tasked to do, go take Melissa Coates' data training. Go read everything on the adoption roadmap. Go read implementation planning, and just become comfortable with being able to speak to those different things and how other organizations have employed or built out or rolled out Power BI. I think that's the best tool that you can put in your tool belt that'll equip you to make some more of these broader decisions on how best practices and what's working for other organizations. Because when I employ them in my business for other companies, they love it. The communication is clear. The expectations are clear. Tommy, what would be your final thoughts?
I think expectations. It's going to start with expectations. Expectations for you, what you need to know. So what education you need.
Yeah.
Expectations for what success looks like in 6 months and 12 months for this team. And then the expectations for the success of Power BI at that department. And then overall the company. Understanding those off the bat and having those well established to me is paramount.
Seth, what do you feel?
I would just say, take a high level view of the landscape and a lot of things that we've covered. Just understand the pieces, how you would build a plan to go execute on this, and then figure out the details of those later. Right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of learning that you may focus in on, and it would also outline the areas that you would hire people to go focus in on, depending on what the overall responsibilities of the role and what the organization wants you to do.
Totally agree.
And then with that framework, right? And you can go execute on things, and it's always a little bit different depending on the politics and size of the organization. And just make sure that it's a good fit and that it's what you want to do.
Love it. Well, thank you all very much for watching. I hope this was a good, informative episode. Great question. Thank you very much for submitting a question. If you have a question or something you want to have us talk about, you can go ahead and submit it to powerbi.tips/podcast. We have a dedicated page on the bottom. There's a form where you could submit your question right there, and we'll get it. And then we usually groom those down every so often. And Tommy does a great job of combing through the good stuff and bubbling to the interesting questions to the top. With that, our only ask, if you like the podcast, is to just please share it. Share it on LinkedIn or social media or Twitter or something like that. Tweet out a link, say, hey, this is a good episode. I learned these things from it, or whatever you want to do. We really appreciate the extra support, just helping us get into more people's hands and sharing the cool information and our ramblings about stuff. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Yeah, Mike, one real quick thing on the podcast questions. Please keep the questions in the spirit of the podcast. We will not solve your individual DAX questions.
We will not. Sorry.
No, that's not going to happen. We've had some very interesting questions. We're like,
how do I use treat as?
So to keep in the spirit of how the topics here, but do whatever you want. But if you want it on here, I'm giving you advice.
True.
You're welcome.
That's a little insider
scoop.
Yeah, a little insider scoop. Yeah,
love it.
If you enjoy the podcast, make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Overcast. I've been starting to listen. Actually, I've been starting to listen on Overcast, and it speeds it up a little. It blinks out some of the space. It's awesome. If you want to watch and see Seth's amazing T-shirt, by the way, that I'm seeing for the first time today, of a dinosaur and a fox and or a cat or something with a Microsoft flag, which is great. Join the conversation live, and maybe you'll see that shirt more often. Or maybe he'll sell it. I don't know, because I love that shirt. So 7:30 in the morning, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Awesome. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.